On a humid Memphis night in August 1977, Elvis stepped onto the Graceland staircase, looked at Priscilla, and whispered an announcement that froze the entire house staff in place. Everyone thought it was just exhaustion, but the truth was far heavier, and it would change Priscilla's life forever. The night air sat heavy over Memphis, the kind of heat that clung to your skin even after the sun disappeared. Inside Graceland, just past the stained-glass peacock doors, the lights were low and the hall smelled faintly of cologne and old vinyl. It was August 12, 1977, a Friday night, and the house felt strangely awake for that hour. Nancy Rook, the soft-spoken housekeeper who had moved like a shadow through these rooms for years, carried a folded towel down the hall. She paused near the staircase, listening. Elvis's footsteps were above her, slow, uneven, almost like he was pacing in circles. She whispered to Red West, who leaned against the wall with worry etched across his face. Something was wrong, and everyone felt it even before a word was said. Outside, you could hear the faint hum of fans gathered at the gates, maybe 30 or 40 of them. They waited the way they always did, hoping for a glimpse, a wave, a smile. But tonight there would be nothing, not even the usual curtain shift from Elvis's bedroom window. At 11:48 p.m., a car pulled up. The gravel crunched under tires. Priscilla stepped out, quiet and composed, but her eyes carried a question. She'd been invited, not by the staff, not by the colonel, but by Elvis himself, and he hadn't asked her to bring anyone else. Inside, she walked past the framed gold records that lined the hallway. She'd seen them 1,000 times, but tonight they looked different, like trophies from a life slipping out of someone's hands. She found Elvis near the living room entrance. He stood with his back to her, a white scarf dangling from one hand, the edges brushing the floor. That scarf, years later, would sit in a shadow box in her private archive, untouched by anyone else. Elvis! Her voice broke the silence like a soft bell. He turned slowly. His face looked tired, older than the 42 years he carried. His eyes were glassy. He tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. He didn't hug her. He didn't move closer. He just stared, as if trying to memorize her before saying anything at all. Behind him, on the coffee table, lay the set list for his upcoming tour, 21 shows, starting in Portland. But the pages were bent at the corners, untouched for days. A cup of water sat beside them, warm now. A clock ticked on the wall. Felt too loud. "You came," he said finally. "You asked," she answered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt like it was shrinking, closing in on the two of them. Priscilla sensed something was off, something deeper than lack of sleep or another fight with the colonel. She knew this man better than anyone alive. She knew when silence meant danger. Have you ever felt tension so strong it feels like the air itself is warning you? And what do you do when the person you once loved looks like they're carrying a secret too heavy to name? Elvis dropped the scarf. It hit the carpet without a sound. "Scylla," he whispered, "I need to talk to you, alone." And in that moment, she understood this wasn't about the tour, or the fans, or even the music. Something far bigger was coming. Something she would never fully recover from. Priscilla followed Elvis into the smaller den at the back of Graceland, the one with the dark wood walls and the faint smell of old leather. A single lamp glowed on the side table, throwing soft light across his face. He didn't sit. He didn't even look at the couch. He walked in circles, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them. Outside, a distant group of fans started singing "Love Me Tender," their voices floating over the lawn. Usually he'd smile at that. Tonight he didn't flinch. The sound only made him pace faster. "Elvis," Priscilla said gently, "what's going on?" He stopped, turned, and the next words came out in a voice she barely recognized. Low, shaky, almost breaking apart. "I'm canceling the tour." She blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "You're what?" "All 21 shows." He dragged a hand across his forehead. "Portland, Anaheim, Knoxville. All of them. It's over." The sentence dropped like a stone. The tour was supposed to start in just days. Audiences of 18,000 people were already holding tickets. The Colonel had been bragging all month about sellouts. The band had rehearsed until their fingers cramped. And Elvis, no matter how tired, had always pushed through. Priscilla stepped closer. "Elvis, you can't just cancel." "I already did," he cut in. "They'll hear in the morning." His breathing was uneven. His hands shook. For a man who spent decades commanding arenas, this moment felt like watching a mountain crumble. The mic of an unseen room monitor crackled softly. Somewhere in the house, a door shut. The tension spread like cold air. Graceland wasn't just a home, it was a pressure chamber. And tonight, everyone could feel it. "Elvis," she whispered, "tell me the truth. What's really happening?" He laughed once, but there was nothing warm in it. "Truth? I don't even know who I am out there anymore. I put on the jumpsuit, I smile, I wave, but I feel like a ghost wearing someone else's skin." A mid-hook slipped into the room like a warning. But what Elvis confessed next wasn't about music at all. It was about survival. He reached for the table and steadied himself. Even that small gesture felt heavy. The lamp flickered slightly, as if reacting to the energy in the room.
I'm tired, silly.
Not just sleepy, not just worn out. He pressed a fist against his chest. "I'm tired in my soul." She felt her throat tighten. How do you help someone when their pain comes from the inside? And how do you pull someone back when they already feel halfway gone? "Elvis, please," she whispered. "Talk to me." He looked at her with an expression she had seen only once before, years earlier, when fame had swallowed their marriage whole. "This world doesn't care if I fall apart," he said softly. "But you always did." A tear slipped down Priscilla's cheek. "Elvis, I'm here. Just tell me what you need." He took a breath. And that's when he revealed the real reason. The reason that would shatter the next 7 days. "I'm canceling the tour. Because if I go out there again, I don't think I'll come back." The room froze, and so did she. The moment Elvis said the words, something in the room shifted. It felt like the air grew heavier, as if the walls themselves were listening. Priscilla tried to breathe steadily, but her heart was pounding so loudly she wondered if he could hear it too. "Elvis, what do you mean you won't come back?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he walked to the window and pulled the curtain back an inch. Outside, the fans were still there. Some sitting on blankets, some leaning on the fence, some clutching old ticket stubs like tiny pieces of hope. Even in the darkness, their faces looked full of love. Full of the belief that tomorrow would bring another show, another roar, another legend moment. Elvis let the curtain fall. "I can't carry all that anymore," he whispered. "Not alone." A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Red West had been waiting outside, listening even though he wasn't supposed to. When Priscilla opened the door to call for water, he stepped inside instead. "What's going on?" Red asked. "Everybody's worried." "You okay, E?" Elvis didn't lift his head. "No," he said simply. Red froze. He had been with Elvis since before the fame swallowed everything. He had seen fights, meltdowns, late-night panic, exhaustion that made grown men collapse. But he had never heard Elvis say that word out loud. Not once. Before Red could respond, the phone on the table rang. The shrill tone cut through the room like a blade. Elvis didn't touch it. Red did. He answered, listened for 2 seconds, then held the phone out with a grim expression. "It's the Colonel," he said. "He's screaming." Elvis took the phone, pressed it to his ear, and said nothing. The Colonel's voice exploded loud enough for Priscilla and Red to hear every word. "Elvis, what is this nonsense about canceling? You owe me millions. You're not quitting anything." Elvis closed his eyes, breathing slow. "I'm done, Tom," he said quietly. "You're not done," the Colonel barked. "You walk out on this tour and you'll be ruined. You'll lose everything." And then Elvis said something that shocked everyone in the room. "I already lost everything." A silence hit the line so hard it felt like a slap. "Elvis, don't do this," the Colonel hissed. "Think about the image. Think about the money." But Elvis didn't care about images anymore. He handed the phone back to Red without saying goodbye. The pattern breaker fell like thunder. Elvis, the debt doesn't matter anymore, Priscilla whispered, trying to ground him. But he shook his head. It does matter, he said. Just not in the way Tom thinks. She stared at him, confused. Elvis, what are you trying to tell me? He opened a drawer and pulled out a wrinkled envelope. Inside it was a list of payments, loans, advances, deals he never agreed to, all tied to the Colonel's decisions. The numbers were shocking. Even Red let out a breath when he looked. Elvis, Priscilla said, this could ruin you. He closed the drawer slowly. It already has. A mid-hook slid into the moment like a warning bell. But the debt wasn't the real danger. The real danger was what Elvis planned to do next. The house felt ice-cold, even with the summer heat outside. Red stepped forward, face pale. Please, don't talk like this. But Elvis turned away from both of them, staring at the dark window again. I just want to disappear, he said quietly. Priscilla felt the floor tilt beneath her. Red looked at her helplessly, and the night grew even darker. What do you do when the person the world loves most is ready to walk away? And how do you stop someone whose mind is already halfway out the door? Before Priscilla could speak, Elvis stepped toward her, and what he said next changed everything. Elvis stood in front of Priscilla, breathing slowly, like each breath was something he had to convince his body to take. The lamp behind him glowed soft gold, outlining his shoulders, making him look both larger than life and heartbreakingly fragile at the same time. The silence between them stretched until it almost hurt. Scylla, he said, I need you to listen. She nodded, but her hands trembled. He gestured toward the door. Red, go. Please. Red hesitated, eyes flicking between them, but Elvis gave him a tired look that said not now. The door closed. The sound echoed like a drumbeat across the room. Priscilla took a few steps forward. Elvis, what are you going to do? He swallowed hard. His eyes glistened, reflecting the small lamp flame. And then, with a voice stripped of every layer of performance, he said, I'm ending it. All of it. After this week, there will be no more Elvis Presley. The words didn't rise or fall. They didn't echo like some dramatic speech. They landed quietly, painfully, like a truth he'd been holding for far too long. Priscilla's breath hitched. What are you talking about? I'm retiring, he whispered. For good.
No concerts. No recordings.
No press.
No tours.
I'm walking away. Disappearing. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. You don't mean that. Yes, he said, steady now.
I do.
Then came the short bursts, each one sharper than the last. I can't breathe in that life. I can't carry that weight. I can't pretend anymore. The words cut through the room like cold steel. Priscilla shook her head slowly. But you love music. You love the crowd. He looked down. I used to. The crowd outside sang again. Faint, hopeful, off-key. But inside the house, their voices sounded like ghosts of a world he no longer belonged to. He walked to a drawer near the sofa and opened it gently. Inside was a small silver bracelet, one she hadn't seen in years. He lifted it carefully, almost reverently, and placed it in her hand. It felt warm, as if he'd been holding it for hours before she arrived. She looked at the inscription. The date, September 13th, 1959, the day they met in Germany. Elvis, she whispered. I kept it because it reminded me of before everything got loud, he said. Before the Colonel, before the jumpsuits, before the crowds turned into storms. Her eyes flooded. Why are you giving this to me now? He held her gaze. Because this is goodbye to that version of me. And I don't know what's left afterward. Her knees almost buckled. Elvis, don't talk like this. You're scaring me. He stepped closer, voice trembling. I'm scared too, Scylla. You think I want to feel like this? Every night I look at myself in the mirror and I don't see a man. I see a brand, product, something built to make money for everyone except the person inside the skin. Lightning flickered faintly outside, far away. The house groaned with the sound of settling wood. Even the air felt like it was holding its breath. "What are you planning to do?" she asked. He hesitated. Then he said something that froze her spine. "I'm leaving Graceland after the weekend. Not for a break. Not for rehab. I'm leaving for good. And no one will know where I go." She stared at him, unable to speak. A pattern breaker sliced through the stillness.
I'm disappearing, Sille.
"Forever." She grabbed his arm.
No, Elvis, no.
"You can't just vanish. You think the world will let you? You think your fans will let you?" He blinked away a tear. "They won't have a choice." Her voice cracked. "You think leaving will save you?" He whispered, "It's the only thing that can." Her tears fell freely now. "And what about Lisa Marie? What about your family? What about me?" He looked at her with a pain so deep it seemed bottomless. "That's the part one can never fix," he said. The thunder rolled in the distance. And then he said something even darker. Something she would replay in her mind for the rest of her life. "If I stay, Scylla, I won't survive this." The room spun. Her breath caught. And the world felt like it was about to break open. The storm clouds drifted closer to Memphis the next morning, gray and swollen, hanging low over Graceland like a warning. Inside the mansion, the halls were unusually quiet. Even the staff moved slower, whispering as if raising their voices would make everything worse. Something had shifted after last night, and everyone could feel it. Priscilla returned early, long before sunrise. She found Elvis sitting on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The room smelled like coffee gone cold. The curtains were still drawn. He hadn't slept. You could tell by the dark shadows under his eyes. "Elvis," she said gently, "you need help, real help." He didn't argue. That alone scared her. Elvis Presley never surrendered without a fight. But today he just nodded, slow and tired, like the weight inside him had finally won. By late morning, Dr. George Nicopolos arrived. Known as Dr. Nick, he had treated Elvis through years of pain, exhaustion, and pressure. He checked his pulse, listened to his heart, pressed against his ribs, asked quiet questions. Nancy Rook lingered near the door, clutching a fresh towel the way someone holds a shield. "How long have you felt like this?" Dr. Nick asked. Elvis shrugged. "Long enough." Priscilla stood beside him, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had seen him struggle before, after tours, after arguments with the colonel, after lonely nights where the house felt too big. But this was different. He wasn't just tired. He was unraveling. Dr. Nick prescribed new medications. He spoke softly about rest, structure, slowing down. But Elvis barely reacted. It was like he was listening from far away. After the doctor left, Elvis closed the bedroom door and sat on the carpet with his back against the dresser. Priscilla joined him. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft rumble of thunder outside. "Elvis," she whispered, "don't disappear on me. Not this way." He looked at her, eyes glassy. "I don't want to hurt you, Scylla, but I can't keep pretending I'm okay." A pattern breaker fell from his lips like a stone. "I recorded something last night." She blinked. "Recorded what?" He stood slowly, walked to a wooden cabinet, and pulled out a small tape recorder, the kind he used to catch quick song ideas. But this tape wasn't for music. You could feel that in the way he held it, careful, almost afraid. "What's on it?" she asked. He hesitated. "Words I needed to say, in case I couldn't say them later." She felt her heart sink.
Elvis, no.
He shook his head. "It's not a goodbye. Not exactly. It's just me being honest. Talking about being tired, being scared, being human." He placed the recorder in her hands. Felt heavier than it should. "You keep it," he said. "If something happens, you'll understand me better than anyone." Her fingers tightened around it. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the window. The sky darkened further, and a faint drizzle began. Graceland's white columns looked ghost-like against the gray. "Elvis," she whispered, "you don't have to do this alone." He sighed and leaned his head back against the dresser. "But that's the problem, Scylla. I've been alone for a long time, even when the world was cheering. She didn't have an answer. Sometimes love isn't enough to pull someone out of a place they've been sinking into for years. Still, she reached for his hand. "You're not alone today," she said softly. "And you won't be tomorrow." He nodded, but his eyes drifted to the window, to the storm clouds gathering. The tape sat between them like a fragile truth. And something in Priscilla knew this week would not end the way either of them hoped. The morning of August 16th, 1977, rose with a strange stillness over Memphis. The storm had passed, but the sky felt washed out and exhausted, like the world itself had cried all night. Graceland sat quiet behind its gates, and the usual cluster of fans, 40, maybe 50, waited outside with coffee cups and soft conversation. They didn't know the weight of the week. They didn't know what had been whispered in these halls. Priscilla, however, carried every moment of it in her chest. She walked through Graceland slowly, passing the framed photographs, the gold records, the endless symbols of a life that had never belonged to just one man. In her hand was the small tape recorder Elvis had given her. She hadn't pressed play. Not yet. The thought of hearing his private fears, spoken into the darkness, felt too heavy. Nancy Rook approached her gently. "He's still sleeping," she said. "Or trying to." Priscilla nodded. Her heart twisted as she remembered the night before. Elvis sitting on the edge of his bed, whispering that he didn't know how much longer he could carry the weight. His voice had sounded so small, so unlike the man who once held 20,000 people in complete silence at Madison Square Garden. "Elvis needs rest," Priscilla said quietly, though she didn't fully believe the words. "A few more hours won't hurt." Downstairs, Charlie Hodge fussed with a stack of unopened fan letters. He looked up at Priscilla, eyes red from lack of sleep. "He was talking strange last night," Charlie said, "like he was trying to say goodbye without saying the word." She swallowed hard. "He's overwhelmed, but he's still here. That counts." Yet deep inside, a fear she couldn't name gnawed at her ribs. Around noon, the house seemed to exhale. A soft breeze rattled the curtains. Somewhere outside, a fan's radio played "Suspicious Minds." And in the hallway, Priscilla stopped, pressed her back against the wall, and finally lifted the tape recorder to her ear. Her thumb hovered over the play button. She didn't press it. Instead, she heard footsteps. Heavy, rushed. "Priscilla!" Charlie's voice cracked like lightning. She turned sharply. His face was pale. His hands shook. And in that moment, before he even spoke another word, she knew. Something had happened. Something irreversible. Hours later, after doctors, after sirens, after the world itself seemed to collapse into grief, Priscilla stood outside the gates of Graceland and watched hundreds of fans gather. Some cried silently. Some sobbed loudly. Some held old ticket stubs or worn photographs, gripping them like lifelines. A young girl pressed a folded page of her diary against the fence, whispering, "Thank you, Elvis," before walking away. That moment stayed with Priscilla for decades. In the weeks that followed, the world transformed Graceland into a shrine. Flowers piled against the gates like waves. Candles flickered through the nights. A wooden plaque appeared, placed by fans, engraved with soft words, "We'll carry you forever." But for Priscilla, the true legacy wasn't in the crowds. It wasn't in the headlines or the memorials or the global tributes. It was in a silver bracelet. It was in a tape she still couldn't bring herself to play. And it was in the memory of a man who had whispered his deepest truth in a quiet room, just days before the world lost him. People often asked her why she worked so tirelessly afterward, why she fought legal battles to protect Graceland, why she created Elvis Presley Enterprises, why she opened the mansion to fans from across the planet. Over 600,000 visitors a year would walk those halls, breathe that history, feel that presence. But she never told them the real reason. She did it because he never got the chance to disappear on his terms. So she made sure the best parts of him would never disappear at all. Sometimes she held the tape recorder in her hands, sitting alone in the quiet of her home. She would run her fingers along its edge, remembering his voice, the tremble in it, the fear behind the words he never wanted the world to hear. What would people think? She often wondered. If they knew how human he really was. But she never pressed play. Some truths hurt too deeply to revisit. And some love stories never truly end. Years passed, and the world kept returning to Graceland like pilgrims searching for something they couldn't name. The white columns, the long driveway, the soft hum of tour buses. Everything remained almost exactly as it had been in those final days. But Priscilla knew the truth. Nothing inside those walls had ever felt the same. Some nights, long after visitors left and the gates closed, she would walk through the house alone. The floorboards still creaked in familiar places. The old record player still clicked when she turned it on. And sometimes, without warning, the quiet inside those rooms felt exactly like the quiet of that final week. Heavy, delicate, full of things never said out loud. She often paused by the staircase, remembering him standing there, whispering that he wanted to disappear. That moment stayed sharper than any headline, any tribute, any song. People called Elvis a legend, a star, a miracle. But she remembered the man, the one who had confessed his fears in a trembling voice, who had handed her a silver bracelet because it meant more than any award. And she remembered the tape recorder, still unplayed. It sat in a drawer, wrapped in a soft cloth. She touched it sometimes, but she could never bring herself to hear the voice trapped inside. She didn't want his final private words to become another piece of history for people to analyze or question. Some truths, she believed, belonged only to the heart that heard them first. She carried both the memory and the silence like twin weights. And yet, there was beauty in that silence too, because in that quiet, she learned something she wished the world understood. Even the brightest lights can flicker, even legends can break, and even the strongest people can reach a point where the applause feels too heavy to hold. That is the part of Elvis she kept safe. Not the jumpsuits, not the fame, not the endless expectations, but the human part. The part that whispered, "I'm tired. What do we owe the people who give the world everything? And what happens when they need something back?" Priscilla spent the rest of her life trying to answer that. By protecting his legacy, by shielding his truth, by honoring the man behind the myth. Because greatness doesn't save you, connection does. And sometimes, the loudest love is the love we keep quiet. If the story touched you, share it with someone who remembers Elvis not just as a legend, but as a human being. Stories like this remind us how fragile even the brightest stars can be. And if you want more untold chapters from music history, stay with us. Another hidden story is already waiting.